We have with us tonight Brian Colleran, who was a consultant to the redistricting process and a reapportionment committee, which he no longer is because it's been dissolved, but served faithfully in that role and is also working for the House majority. So, and he's from Alna. So who knew, amongst us, one of the champions of the redistricting process. Brian Colleran.
Hey, thank you very much, Chris. Like Chris said, I was a consultant to the Maine Reapportionment Commission that just wrapped up our work at the end of September. Right now, I am currently serving as the Senior Director to the House Democratic Campaign Committee. And previously, I was also a legislative aide in the State House, and I do live in Alna. So what are some terms that you associate with redistricting? Just general...
gerrymandering.
Gerrymandering. Everybody says gerrymandering. Is there anything else that anybody has that they believe that goes along with redistricting?
I think of the census numbers to drive the redistricting.
Sure.
Population change.
Well, losing representatives or gaining representatives, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Disappointment.
Unfair.
Safe districts.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, gerrymandering. That is the one thing that we hear the most. This right here is a beautiful mess of a map that the Texas State House is proposing for their new congressional maps. This isn't even a State House map. This is a congressional map. This is gerrymandering, in my opinion. And it's just horrible, and how a entire district is supposed to be represented by this when you don't even know what district you're ever in. This is downtown Dallas, Texas that we're seeing here. And it's just such a mess. And this is what the Republicans did to go and carve up everything so that it wouldn't get a fair map. And there is going to be some claims that they're going to have to go and face to go and explain why they did this. And the more disturbing thing is this definitely affects minority communities the most. Now, the reason why Texas is allowed to go or not why they're allowed, but why they do go and create maps like this is because in the Texas Constitution, they can go and pass a map with a simple majority. So you can go and get crazy things that benefits one party and not another. And there's some other kind of commission, nonpartisan type of redistrict commissions that are being proposed around the country. And while it sounds ideal, the problem is that it definitely doesn't help Democrats. And we're seeing big problems of it in Virginia and in North Carolina right now, where the entire redistricting process is just not benefiting them at all to go and make more nonpartisan districts. And the disturbing thing about that is it's going to really put a test or create a test if Congress keeps the majority. And it's just really upsetting. But here in Maine, we have bipartisan redistricting. And what that means is that we need 2/3 of a vote in both the House and the Senate to go and pass any maps. And by nature of Maine's demographics and party registration itself, it's darn near impossible to go and pass something that would just benefit one party versus another. And the Maine Reapportionment Commission is equally, it's designed to be equally benefiting the two parties with the largest members, so the Democrats and the Republicans. So the Maine Reapportionment Commission, go back one more. was chaired by the former state Supreme Court Justice Donald Alexander. He is a Democrat, but he was someone that was agreed upon by both the Democrats and the Republicans in a true bipartisan fashion. And on the left here are all the Democrat supporting members and of the commission, and on the right are the Republicans. And by nature of how this commission is put together, there needs to be compromise. There needs to be something where you're not going to have those crazy gerrymanders, because one side will not stand for it and won't vote for it. So it's kind of a great thing that we have in Maine in our Constitution to go and be a stopgap from creating those crazy Texas gerrymander districts. And I'm just going to go a little bit more into that about how our Constitution is set up to go and ensure that we have fairer and more competitive districts that don't benefit one party or another. And just really go and focus on representing local municipalities and for the state Senate or state House districts, and for the counties for the state Senate districts. So the Maine state Constitution clearly lies out that there should be 151 members to the state House. That in itself will go and not allow the redistricting process to be crazy and create a whole brand new map, a whole new legislative body where they choose fit of how many members they would like to have in the state House. And also in the Maine state Constitution, it clearly lies out that only one representative will represent each district. There are precedents where there would be multiple representatives representing single districts across the state and other states, or across the country and other states. And luckily in Maine, we do not have that. Then another great thing in the Maine state Constitution that we have is that the Senate can actually go and lower itself. And this is kind of a little trivia point, but the Senate could have a map where it be 31, 33, or 35 members. It doesn't have to be 35 as it is. It hasn't been in a long time. And that might be a trivia question that or a trivia answer that I don't know the answer to, of when it was 31, but that is something that can happen. So in the state Constitution, there are, again, some more stopgaps. So whenever the population of a municipality entitles it to more than one district, all of the whole district shall be drawn within municipal boundaries. Kind of sounds pretty bland, and you're wondering why it's an exciting aspect, but it would prevent something like the city of Portland, which is a very democratic city, to be split up 20 different ways all across the north of Maine and all throughout, to go and dilute the Democratic vote in Portland. By having that in the Constitution, it really goes and kind of shores up that what districts will be like, and that they wouldn't be cut to pieces and break communities apart where you wouldn't know who your representative is and how close they would be related to how their politics would relate to the issues of your community. And another aspect of this section of the Constitution is that any population remainder with the municipality should be included in a district with contiguous territory and shall be kept intact. So there are a couple instances of that I'll go into. So one, as I said earlier, with more than one district, all whole districts shall be drawn within municipal borders. We can see that a couple examples of these where just one municipality like Freeport, Yarmouth, Presque Isle, or Skowhegan, or a district all in itself it's good for representation. It's good government to go and draw those districts the way they are. And then, like I was saying before, about any remainder shall be included in a district with contiguous territory and shall be kept intact. That would be like how in Brunswick, it has 2 whole seats and then a remainder that gets paired with the town of Harpswell, and not have the remainder go over the top some, Harpswell, West Bath, Bath, wherever. Just take it all over the place. With Portland, it's a very big city, biggest city in Maine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and a little bit of an extra that is paired with the town of Falmouth. And it creates nice, good districts where people know who their representative is. And I kind of hammered that point, so I'm not going to say it again. So another interesting thing, I hate for this all to be a law school class tonight, but it's very important that in the redistricting process that we have functionally contiguous and compact territory. Functionally is a pretty interesting and critical word for Maine particularly, and especially for here in the mid-coast where we have these peninsulas where you may have a district, if anybody's from Representative Holly Stover's district, she has all of the Booth Bay Peninsula, Westport, and South Bristol. And you would say, well, those South Bristol doesn't connect anywhere on land to Edgecombe and Booth Bay. And the only way to get to Westport is through Wiscasset, unless you're going to go and swim across. But because of the unique nature of Maine's geography, we need to have functionally contiguous districts. And so if there are census blocks or minor county subdivisions, as they refer to them, that touch each other, they would consider that to be contiguous. So if you're ever wondering how a district is made up, that is why it's allowed where South Bristol can be with the Booth Bay Peninsula. Now, there are other things to be considered when drawing these districts, like minimizing the impediments to travel, such as mountains, rivers, oceans, and discontinued roads. But that's a pretty low priority among the makeup of the districts and how they are drawn.
So Brian, so
Yeah.
basically, if you could take a boat and get there directly,
Yes.
it works, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you could go and get some pretty kooky districts that would maybe be on shaky ground for whether they'd hold up in court. But in theory, and we have seen this actually in the past, where Georgetown and Southport, and I think it was maybe over to Phippsburg, were all in the same district. And I'd hate to be the rep of that. They would have to just drive all the way back up and down peninsulas to connect up to one to make that happen.
That was Representative Bruce McDonald.
There you
He
go.
also had a Rousick.
Oh my goodness.
Crazy.
I think that was Representative Holly Stover right there. So this year was chaos for many reasons, but one being that the 2020 census numbers weren't delivered to the state of Maine until August 12th. Normally, we get that data on New Year's Eve, of course, prior every 10 years. And the tough thing that we had to work with this year is the state constitution also requires us to have our maps done and voted on by June 11th. So we weren't even going to get the data. It was estimated that it would be available in mid-August until well after our constitutional requirement. So in, again, true bipartisan fashion, both Republicans and Democrats in the House and in the Senate came together to go and ask the state Supreme Court to have an extension. it was at no fault of our own to not put these maps together, but the federal government. And the reason why a lot of the data was late was because of COVID, of course, but also because of, I believe that they called them inconsistencies in the data, predominantly with like college towns, because there had to be a lot of estimating, which is never good. And really, when it comes down to is that to create these legislative districts, they're all based off of who fills out the census. So if a lot of people in a town do not fill out a census, they will have essentially less representation in the state legislature. So normally we have about 161 days to do our work. This year we had 45 days to come to agreement and have a final map. That was 45 days from when we had the final data in our hands to come to an agreement to go and put together 2 congressional districts, 35 Senate districts, 151 state house districts, and 16 county commission districts. It was definitely an uphill battle in itself. And luckily, there was a good group of us to go and make it all work. So
Actually, it was more than 16 county ones, wasn't it? Because you have multiple districts within counties.
sure. So yeah.
16 sets. of
16
multiple-
maps. Yeah. So in general, some general trends about what happens statewide in Maine is that it's kind of everything that we always hear people talk about, and it actually played out in the census, which was kind of interesting. So we saw large population gains in York and Cumberland County, and large population losses in northern Maine and over in far eastern Maine in Washington County. Here in the mid-coast, it was pretty, there were some modest gains, but it stayed, relatively flat. So overall, what that meant with the congressional map, the state Senate map, and the state house maps is that the districts up north were going to get larger in geographic size and have to go, and the only way to grow would be to go south. Predominantly, this was the case with the congressional and the state Senate maps. With the state house districts, the northern Aroostook County districts also had to definitely grow, same with Washington County. And there were also house districts that were just eliminated up north to go and make up for population size. And there were districts that were just created in York and Cumberland County. So there's a lot more representation of happening in the legislature for those areas of the state. So here in Lincoln County, we saw, again, some pretty modest gains and losses for the most part. The biggest surprise, and this is actually something I don't know if anybody could help answer, is South Bristol grew by 26%. I have no idea why. A lot more people in South Bristol filled out the census in 2020 versus 2010. Could be some escapees of COVID from the cities who may have some summer homes. But for the most part, I mean, we were doing the census in about April of 2020 before a lot of those folks really got here. So I'll give everybody a second because I'm sure everybody wants to go and find their town and see how many people gained and lost here.
Hey, Brian,
Yes.
you hear me? What happens to the representatives of the districts that were eliminated? Do they keep their job until the end of the session? And then they either have to just run under a different number then?
Well, that's a really good question, Jason. So these districts don't go into effect until 2022 elections. So the folks that are in the legislature currently are going to continue to represent the districts that elected them in 2020 until the end of this current 130th legislature. So the people up north, it's not like they're in the English House of Parliament where they have rotten boroughs, where they're legislators that don't represent any people. It's another great thing that we have here, where we actually go and have the census that puts that all together, instead of allowing people to represent rocks and sheep. Sometimes rocks and sheep need representation though too, I guess. But that's a good thing that we have in the United States.
All right, thank you.
So obviously the big thing that everybody was wondering, what was going to happen with the congressional map. So I have the new congressional map here on the left, and there was a pretty big breakthrough with the Apportionment Commission this year, where we recognized, both Democrats and Republicans, that we didn't have a lot of time. And the thing that needed to happen was modest changes. And there wasn't going to be any kind of big change with the congressional map, like a north, or I guess an east-west type of district versus a north-south type of map. We've seen that in the past, where it's been proposed that York and Oxford would be together, and maybe a bit of Cumberland, and then you go and put Androscoggin and all the way east together. And would really love to do that to get Jared Golden and Shelley Pingree in the same district, but it just wasn't going to happen. So this year we kind of focused in on just moving different towns around Kennebec County. So previously, Augusta and Hallowell and Reedfield and Winthrop and Wayne, Fayette, and Mount Vernon were not in the were in the first congressional district, and they've been all moved to the second congressional district. There was a lot of discussion about where Waterville would go and if it would be moved to the second congressional district, since there was recent precedent of it being with the second congressional district. But that was just such a sticking point for the Republicans. They would rather have the maps not pass and just go to court than stick Waterville in the second congressional district. When the maps, if the maps were to go to court, we would have no idea what the outcome would be. And at that point, we'd rather go and still control the process while we could. And so our agreement was to go in forward and just keep these maps as with modest changes, with Waterville not being in the second congressional district. It was interesting. I don't know if anybody saw one of the earlier first Republican proposals, where Oakland, where both Bruce Poliquin and another Republican congressional candidate by the name of Mike Perkins both reside. Well, one resides, one has a PO box. Both of them are based out of Oakland, and it was sent down to the first congressional district. I don't know what the play on that was, but this is what our map looks like now, and Lincoln County is not touched, but I'm sure that there's a lot of excitement to go and help Jared Golden out for Democrats. So going on to the state Senate map, there are also really no changes for Lincoln County here. Chloe Maxman, who represents almost all of Lincoln County besides the town of Dresden, but also represents Windsor in Kennebec County and Washington in Knox County. Her district stayed the same. And for Dresden folks, Eloise Vitelli, who's your rep right now, is still keeping the same exact district for the 2022 election. But as you might see on the district map on the left, you can clearly make out what the district borders are up north. But as you get further south down to York and Cumberland County, you can barely make them out. That kind of shows where populations, because all of the districts have to have equal populations as possible. And it kind of shows how compact some districts are with how many folks live there, and others where there's probably more trees and rocks than there are folks that live there. So the big changes were in the state house maps. In Lincoln County, there wasn't a single district that stayed the same. And that was more about how individual smaller house districts either were not legal because they're either too large or too small, but also with population shifts up north and south, they will meet here in central Maine. And by the point of everything changing north and south, and maybe some other things in between, all of the other districts would just change a little bit. So in Lincoln County, Waldoboro, our biggest town, is now paired with two Knox County towns of Friendship and Washington, and also Bremen and Louds Island. This is the new House District 45, and the current legislator who represents most of this district or represented this district right now, is Jeffrey Evangelos out of Friendship. And this district used to include the western half of Union, and the change is now Bremen and Louds Island is replacing that. And the next district over in 46 here in the heart of Lincoln County, you have this district currently represented by Lydia Crafts from Newcastle, which is Bristol, Damariscotta, Monhegan, Newcastle, and Nobleboro. Two things that were really important for us to do as a commission here was to go and put the towns of South Bristol and Nobleboro back together. This previous map, they were split. I don't think it was maliciously. I didn't serve on the commission then, but it was probably more to make the math work, because I keep repeating it, but the number one priority is to make equal districts as possible. And that was a goal that we were able to accomplish with Representative Kraft's district. And now she can safely say that she represents all of the people of Nobleboro. And for Representative Stover, she can safely say that she represents all of the people of South Bristol. We talked a little bit about Representative Stover's district a little bit ago, but the only change is that little bit of South Bristol. And we look forward to her to continue serving this wonderful district. And then we have here a new seat put together from two previous House districts. This is the new House District 47. So previously in Lincoln County, there were only two whole House districts represented wholly within Lincoln County, and 5 other House districts that had parts of Lincoln County. That would be, the Wiscasset seat, the Somerville seat, the Dresden seat, and Waldoboro seat. Now we can go and put together a third whole Lincoln County seat. So Lincoln County has better representation in the state legislature that they are rightfully due. And so this new district is Alna, Jefferson, Whitefield, and Wiscasset. Alna and Wiscasset coming from a district that used to be paired with Pittston and Randolph, and then Jefferson and Whitefield from a district that was all formerly paired with Chelsea and part of Nobleboro. Right now, this district will be open with no incumbent legislator running for it, since Jeff Hanley, a Republican from Pittston, is turned out. And then nearby, the other half of the two districts that we were able to go and piece together this is the remainder where this new House District 53 has the Kennebec County towns of Chelsea, Randolph, and Pittston, and the town of Dresden from Lincoln County. This is a very Kennebec River-oriented district. The current legislator that represents this is Michael Lemelin, a Republican from Chelsea. So we'd love to have a great, strong Democrat run in this district. And then for our wonderful Lincoln County chair, our new House District 62 is the Kennebec County towns of China and Windsor, and the Lincoln County towns of Somerville, and the one person in Hibbert's Gore, and the Waldo County town of Palermo. And this is another district that is open with Republican from China, Tim Terrio, being termed out as well. So we'd love to have another great Democrat run for this seat. And then finally, the Apportionment Commission was tasked with putting together these county commission maps. This was some pretty low-hanging fruit for us to go and just find quick agreement. And with these districts being so small, only over half of them didn't have to change at all. So it was our intention to just keep them the same. We only had 45 days altogether to draw these 4 sets of maps, and we'd rather just keep them the same. So if you're very concerned about county politics, you'd be good to know that they all stayed the same. So what now that you know about this, and yet if you do fall into a new district, introduce yourself to your legislator. Make them known who you are, what are the issues that you care for, what you find important. So I have the contact information for the incumbents that are not going to be termed out, that are going to be representing Lincoln County here, and definitely encourage everybody to go and introduce themselves.